whenever you're attaching anxiously. It's like, oh, I just felt something, it was really uncomfortable and I have to get out of that feeling. Or I feel empathy for someone else and I like want to fix it really bad before I'm thinking it through. And in that regard, I have a really high perception of others and a lower perception of myself.
Welcome to the Feminine Alchemy Podcast, where we explore the truth about the feminine, the peaceful, the wild, and the visceral. I'm your host, J.N. Behringer, joined by my co-hosts, Julie Dean Richards and Kaylee Rose. Each week, we explore the deep mysteries of the feminine and help listeners apply them to their daily lives in a practical way. Join us to unlock the hidden wisdoms your soul has been waiting for.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Feminine Alchemy. I am Julie Dean Richards, and I am so lucky to be joined by my friend, London Reber. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her before we start because she's fantastic. In fact, you could say she's a beacon of inspiration and transformation. She was crowned Miss California in the United States in 2012. London has since channeled her passion to positive change into her role as a pivot relationship coach, offering invaluable insights, guiding individuals on their journeys to self-improvement. A devoted mother and stepmom, her most recent title is being awarded Supermom of 2023, and it's a cherished testament to her unwavering dedication to her family. She's been sober for 12 years. She believes in the power of spirituality to unlock a fulfilling life, embodying the mantra, changing your mind changes your life. Everyone, welcome London. Say hi, London.
Hi everyone. So happy you're here. Thank you, Julie.
Yes, we're so happy to have you. I loved reading that bio. I loved the depth of it, the authenticity of it, the realness of it, and just giving us a piece of you. And for everyone listening, we're going to be talking about some really deep and potent topics today. We'll be touching on attachment, boundaries, authenticity. And I'm so excited for what London brings to the table because she is just fantastic and so cute and so sweet. So let's get started. London, what made you get into becoming a relationship coach of all things?
Sure. Yes. It took quite a bit of my own self-discovery and trying things out and seeing what works and seeing what didn't, and just being a seeker in general, and understanding what I have to offer is somehow muffled underneath all of the chaos and confusion and disconnect, and what is that about for me? And so obviously getting sober was a huge first step on that. And once I got sober and I had a few years under my belt with that, and I really lost the obsession to drink, and I was really functioning well with no mind-altering substances, and yet my relationships were still suffering. I still felt like I couldn't get it right, and I couldn't understand why. And I was I'm trying to do different things to get different results, and yet the things that I'm doing still seem like I'm taking myself hostage, or I am being my own worst enemy, self-sabotaging in these relationships by doing these old patterns over and over, even though I'm trying to show up differently. And I just didn't know how. There was this blank space in the middle. And so I actually went to this retreat. It's called the Glass House. It's in Northern California. And I did the retreat as a client myself, and it literally changed the entire trajectory of my life. Personally, myself, I wouldn't have been able to do it if I wasn't already sober, and yet everything after this retreat is a result of the work that I did there. And it was just so much awareness that it brought me that I was okay, how can I offer this to other people? And immediately wanted to change course in my life and be able to be that bridge for other people to be able to also access these tools.
Wow, that's awesome. I love to hear that. And it's just so fascinating because you mentioned this piece of like working with yourself and these layers and feeling muffled. And I think so many people feel that way. But I think someone looking at you being like, what? She's a beauty queen, literally, right? Like she does these pageants and things like that. And she must know who she is. So what got you into that piece of it, and how was that for you? Like you just got named Supermom, I guess a couple years ago. Now 2023 wasn't that long ago. So how do you do all of that, and how does that play into this?
I appreciate you pointing that out because, yes, I definitely had to grow into it. Even my name when I was younger, I was like, how could you do this to me? I just wanted to be like Jenny. And now I like love being London, like I really have had to grow into my authenticity and who I really am. And from a young age, it felt like every time I would achieve something, then like the goalpost was higher and higher and higher. And I, at some point, had burnout in my 20s where my alcoholism got really strong. And I was just like as afraid of success as I was of failure. It was almost like if I just did nothing, then I couldn't let anybody down. And I was putting so much pressure on myself that like I had to continue to like up the bar when really, like the people around me, they reflected back to me now that they were already proud of me and everything was fine. But I was the one like shoulding on myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like you should be doing this. I had a really difficult time with like guilt-free rest. And I was just like thinking that my productivity was my worth.
Mm-hmm.
And I won Miss California when I was in my first year of sobriety. So that also came from sobriety. And I was just kind of doing the next right indicated action. And somebody was like, you'd be really good at this. I think you should go for it. And I turned to the spiritual tools I had so far at that point, like to even win that title, I believe, because when I was behind the curtain, like in my bathing suit, and I was just like, what am I doing? Like I was like, I want to make my family proud and I don't want to let my sponsors down. And then I realized I had this moment of clarity, like everybody wants that. That does not set me apart from the other women in this competition. Like why would I be Miss California over them? And I had this like aha moment that like if they want what I bring to the table, they have to pick me. And if they pick anyone else, it's okay because I can't be them. I had really gotten this clarity, like I cannot ever be someone else, or like I was so tired of changing or altering myself to try to control or manipulate an outcome, like being this hyper vigilant version, that I was just like, I'm just going to go out there and be my most authentic self. And if they want what I have, they'll pick me. And if they don't, that's okay, because I could never be what they want anyways. And that was something I learned, like how to carry out through all my relationships moving forward too.
Hey friends, it's Julie. I'm just popping in here real quick to tell you about a very special invitation we have for you. If you have been feeling deeply called to learn more about your feminine identity, or to see what feminine power really is, or you're just loving the podcast, then Kaylee and I would love to invite you to join our community, Feminine Alchemist. Inside, we host live monthly women's circles, challenges, and Wheel of the Year celebrations. They are seriously so much fun. We have monthly workshops where we bring in experts to teach on anything from menstruation to mythology. You'll also get access to our library of courses about astrology, intuition techniques, sacred embodiment, and cyclical living. And most importantly, you'll be able to connect with women who are like-hearted and walking the same path as you. So if this sounds exciting to you, join today by clicking the link in the show notes or going to femininealchemist.com. That's alchemist spelled M-Y-S-T. Okay, back to the episode. I think this idea of, using the tools that you had and realizing this big realization that one of those tools was yourself, like your deep authenticity, who you were, and that who you were was enough and you don't have to be who they wanted you to be. I think that's really, really big. So let's jump into that a little bit more. Like, let's dig into this conversation and this topic. I would love to start with attachment because I think people have heard maybe of attachment styles before. They don't really know why as much unless they've had to engage with it or engage with psychology or therapy. They don't know why or how that really affects them. So maybe let's just start with going through like, what is an attachment style, and what are common ones we can look at, and why do they affect us?
Sure. Yeah. And I love that you said that you mirrored back to me that I finally got that I was enough just the way that I was. That is actually like one of my mantras, that like I do enough, I have enough, I am enough. Because even today as a mom and somebody who is engaging the public as a coach, it's like it can get loud at times, even that like I'm not doing enough and I don't, I don't have enough and I need more, and that I think is so like socially conditioning. I think it's socially conditioned into us that like, especially as mothers, that like we need to do and give so much, and so I really appreciate that like you even just like recognize that that's what the place I had gotten to in that moment was, like I am enough just the way that I am. And like really I would love for the listeners today to like be able to take away that we don't have to do anything to prove that we're worth loving. We are lovable just the way that we are. And we came into this world, this light. Like you think of a baby and the baby's not doing anything to gain your love. Like you're worthy of love just the way you are. And you still have that light and that peace inside of you, no matter how much like life on life's terms has thrown on top of the light. It's up to us now as adults to clear it away and, wash it and scrape it and shovel it until we can let that light shine again. Just realizing though that we still have it and we've always had it and it's there. And it's about how can we let ourselves feel safe to let it out. And I think the more that other people shine their light, the more it gives like people permission. At least for me, when I saw other people shining their light, it gave me permission to also like shine mine. And yeah, so much of that will then ultimately guide us into being able to attach securely. And so in Pivot, we use a little bit different language. We try to kind of break it down. Simple is our superpower. So instead of the like anxious, preoccupied, we just say anxious. And the dismissive, avoidant, we just say avoidant. And then the one that's like anxious, avoidant, we actually call ambivalent. And because it's like back and forth. And so we use a little bit of a different language in Pivot, and the goal is obviously to attach securely. And in Pivot also, we don't put anybody in a box. So we believe that you attach in all the different ways, depending on the people, place, or thing that you're attaching to at that moment and what you're going through and which part of you is activated, right? And so it's like very complex. And yet it can also be really simple if we look at it through the lens of like thinking, feeling, and doing. So what am I thinking? What am I feeling? And what am I doing? And where is the action coming from? So if you're attaching securely, you're thinking, feeling, and doing congruently all at once. You're able to be like, I'm thinking that person is so rude, talking to me like that. I'm feeling disrespected. And what I want to do is slam the door. And what I'm actually going to do as a result of being able to check in with this is say, like, okay, thank you, and walk out. Right? And that would be a healthy adult action versus like a habitual action, which is coming from like, a less secure part of ourselves. So being able to think, feel, and do congruently is how we attach securely. And when we're attaching securely, we have a high perception of ourselves and also a high perception of others. And it doesn't mean you have to like the other person. It just means like you're at least in acceptance that this is the best that they can do, or this is who they truly are. And you're not trying to change them to be someone else. And then when you get into the other like quadrants, the other three, that's going to change. You're kind of going to go on the scale down, either lower your perception of yourself or lower your perception of others. So when you're attaching ambivalently, which in traditional psychology is like anxious avoidant, you have a low perception of both. The other person and yourself, and you're thinking and feeling, and you're really stuck between those two. And then eventually you do, and then you're like right back to like thinking about the thing you just did and then feeling a certain way about it and then thinking and feeling. And so you're really just like stuck in this, I can't make a decision, and I'm like almost paralyzed. I can't make movement in my life. And that's where you'll see like for me at least, it was like where my depression was. I'm not taking much action. I'm just thinking like this terrible thought, and then it's driving a really heavy feeling, and then I'm judging in my head about the feeling, and then I'm feeling something else. So then if you're attaching anxiously, you actually, then you're feeling and then acting and then thinking about it afterwards. So your actions are being driven by your feelings. If whenever you're attaching anxiously, it's like, oh, I just felt something, it was really uncomfortable and I have to get out of that feeling. Or I feel empathy for someone else and I like want to fix it really bad before I'm thinking it through. And in that regard, I have a really high perception of others and a lower perception of myself. Mm-hmm. And then when we're attaching avoidantly, we have a higher perception of ourselves and a lower perception of others. And we're thinking, doing, and then maybe feeling a little bit afterwards and getting right back into our head, thinking and doing and feeling. So when you break it down like that, hopefully that's easier for people to really conceptualize. And then you can kind of like take that in your pocket and it's like, how am I attaching right now? And what would it take for me to pivot into attaching securely?
And so what you're saying is that we are attaching all the time, like we're going through this all the time. Because I usually hear this in the context of you as a child, the way you attached to your parents and or like your family members. And so like as a child, you were avoidant attachment style, let's say. And so then that kind of carries into your life later. But are you saying we're constantly doing this?
We're constantly attaching to something, someone at all times. It's how you're attaching, right? Like even if you're just laying in the bed and you're feeling peaceful, then you're attaching securely to your environment and to yourself, like in that moment. So we're always attaching in some way. And the goal is not to think that we have to attach securely 100% of the time to be enough or to be okay. In Pivot, actually, we talk about it like 70% of the day, like a C, what was that? C's get degrees, right?
Yeah.
And we're not trying to graduate or anything, it's always the journey. We never graduate from this thing and we're always learning. And as soon as we reach another level, there's more to learn and grow from that level. But like 70% of the day, if we could try to attach securely, we're living a life that has a lot of ease and flow at that point. And we're trusting the process and like our higher power is working in our lives. So like, that I'm not in control of everything and everyone, or I don't have to be safe is where you can get to if you're attaching securely primarily throughout the day. And so, yes, there's also like a default attachment style is what I think you're talking about. And so in Pivot, we also talk about developmental psychology where like you have your child part of self. And a lot of people talk about the inner child work now. That's really common. In Pivot, we also talk about your inner teen and your adult self. And then we're trying to help build a healthy adult muscle, which is like your highest level of consciousness that is then going to go in and reparent those other parts and repair the survival patterns that we do from those parts, which is what I was in when I first got sober and couldn't figure out how to have relationships work. It's because I was still like running off survival patterns and attaching anxiously, ambivalently, from my parts of self. So when you become more of like a ninja at all this stuff, you can possibly recognize that each of your parts of self have a default attachment style. And sometimes it's the same one that runs all the way through. And yes, you're right that the original one from childhood is what a lot of times it'll boil down to. If that need is met, if we can start to reparent that part of self to feel secure in our own care, no matter what other people are doing out here, that if your inner child feels safe with you and can trust you, then you can actually attach securely in really like insecure relationships or in chaotic environments, because then you know how to utilize healthy adult boundaries to keep yourself safe. And you can relax on the inside because that part of you is not, I got to fix it to be okay, or I got to run away to be okay, or I don't know what to do, I'm frozen, because you have to practice showing that part of you that your healthy adult self does know what to do and can handle this situation.
So I would love to know, because, okay, this is going to seem like such a simple question when I'm asking you this, and maybe it seems so obvious, but why is this important? Like, why, just to break it down, because we've touched on it, but like, why is it important to attach securely? Like, why is attachment important?
Sure. That is a fantastic question. It sounds simple on the surface, and yet it's, it is the question, the $1,000,000 question. So for me, when I was not attaching securely, I was using people, places, and things in order to feel different. And I find that to be a really valuable just definition of codependency, when like, if they're okay, then I'm okay. So if the situation is okay, then I can be okay. And we're so often busy trying to fix something outside of ourselves to then feel okay on the inside of ourselves. But as long as our okayness is based on something outside of us, then we're always at the mercy of things that are out of our control. And therefore, like, essentially in a state of being the victim, right? Like we're just going to ride the waves of someone else's like day or emotions, and can never really feel like safe in our lives. I think at least that was for me. Like if I was always trying to make sure that I was lovable enough, producing, like whatever it is, in order to then feel okay. And so once I started doing this work and I was able to attach securely with my parts of self, like developing a real relationship with my parts of self, where it's like, if it was tangible, like you can get like a stuffy or a blankie or something that will soothe your child. And when you pull it out, like you're showing yourself, hey, I recognize you. I know you're in there. I know you're hurting, and I'm here for you today, the way that adult that you needed to be there for you never was or wasn't able to be. And so, okay, why is attaching securely so important? Because once I learned how to attach securely, I was able to basically freely move within the world without having those levels of disruption the way I used to. I was able to be like, I can accept things even if I don't approve of them. Like I can live in reality if I'm attaching securely, and I can then work within that reality to change what is in my power. And so if I'm not in reality, I'm in some kind of fantasy, wishing someone else would be different, a different version of themselves, or wishing that they would just be who I need them to be for me to be okay. And that's a really chaotic way to live in my experience, because it always left me like feeling disappointed or unappreciated or misunderstood. And I no longer go to others for that. I work on believing myself and my own intuition and standing in the sunlight of like my truth authentically, and trusting now that the relationships that are meant to be in my life will be attracted to that, and the ones that fall away, that it's like rejection is just redirection, and rejection is for my protection kind of things. Mm-hmm. And like that's what attaching securely has offered me the ability to live like.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So if I were to summarize, maybe I would say securely attaching is important because it allows you to get out of codependency. It helps you to get out of victimhood and to take more control over your life, and also to soothe yourself and have a greater relationship with yourself rather than looking outside yourself for validation.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. Like emotional stability and security, like coming from yourself, and then by doing that, producing healthy relationships. And it allowed me to like not only grow my identity, like in who am I and what do I like and what do I want, but also like my self-worth, that I'm that piece that like, and self-esteem, that I so much was looking for someone else to tell me I'm worthy or show me that I am. Mm-hmm. And by attaching securely, or learning how to attach securely, I was then able to recognize my own worth and be comfortable with the fact that the way other people act does not determine my worth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we've all had, when you describe that experience of not being okay when someone else isn't okay in our relationship, right? Like when it's that feeling, because I've felt that so viscerally in my life, especially when I was younger, this feeling of, if someone's mad at me, I can't be okay. Like, I'm going to be sad. Like, if you're mad at me, oh no, like, I just don't want that person to be mad at me, you know, or to be angry with me or upset with me. Oh dear. And like when you were describing kind of like we're tied to them. And so our emotions are up and down because we're tied to what everyone else does, which we're not in control of at all, right? Like we can't control them. And then it just gave me this image of like being tossed at sea, right? Like you're constantly just like being tossed at sea rather than standing on firm ground. And it sounds like having that secure attachment is standing on that firm ground.
So, Julie, my logo is a lighthouse. And it represents that like we shine our light from our foundation and our firm ground, and that no matter what's happening to any one ship out there, we can't go out and try to save that ship, because then the light will not be there for all the other ships, right? We'll not be able to be of service in our purpose if we're constantly trying to if we're constantly being drug out to sea on the waves of other people's life choices and emotions and their possible inability to self-regulate their emotional life, or their trust issues, or they're not able to be vulnerable, and we're out there trying to like get them to feel safe, and then we're missing out on the opportunities to shine light to the other ships to all find their way to solid ground or to harbor.
Oh, I love that. That's perfect. And you conveyed it so well. I just felt it come through you, that imagery. Yeah, I love that. I think that's beautiful. And I love this idea that you're saying, right? That this idea that if I go out and try to rescue everybody, because I think it's very innate in us, we have to rescue everyone. We have to take care of everyone. We have to make sure they're okay. That's so innate. That if we did that, then what would happen to all the other ships, right? Like you have to let all the other ships come to you. You have to continue to pour light. And even by pouring that light, you're still helping that ship that's lost at sea, even though you can't go get them and save them, right? But you're still helping them by standing on your firm ground. So I really love that concept and how this is tied together.
And it's like you're still planting seeds, and like it's not up to us how they grow. We just have to keep planting seeds and like showing people how to harvest, right? Like showing people how to sow. And I guess like pivoting to a different metaphor, but like when you were like, if you go out to sea and try to help that one person, like you can't. Well, we can keep planting seeds and being the light, and then like trusting in the timing of their story and their journey and their path for when they come to it and when they're capable or when they're willing. Because if we try to force other people before they're willing, like we're just exhausting ourselves and probably hurting the relationship with them anyways. And often like when other people like getting sober, for example, when other people like would try to tell me that it could benefit me to not drink, it was offensive, and it caused like me to push away in that relationship, because it was when I could concede to my innermost self that I had a problem, that I was then able to seek a solution for that problem. And it couldn't come from anybody outside of myself for it to really be that internal motivation that was necessary for it to stick.
Yeah.
I think that's true for like most self-development work, like in your overall well-being. Like we have to have a internal drive for like why we're doing that's greater than just like I'm trying to keep the relationship, because maybe you'll do it just temporarily to keep a relationship, but then like it's not sustainable, and so you hook them back in and they stay, and then a year later you guys are right back in that same pattern because it wasn't authentic. And that is something that was really so mind-blowing for me to learn, is that going back from what you're saying, like how we attached as children, that most of us learned that we have to self-abandon in order to maintain connection.
Totally.
That we can't be authentic, our authentic truth, and tell everything, like who we really are and what we really want, and then still have like them want to be around us or feel like they love us, or like, there was so many times, and maybe as a parent, like if you're hearing this and you're a parent, you're looking at your relationship right now with your kids, like how often do we want them to be different, for them to be okay in our eyes, right? Like, and that's asking them to like abandon their authentic self in order to maintain the connection with us. And what would it look like if your kids, or if you as a child, were able to feel like you could maintain that connection with your primary caregiver even when you were being like the most vulnerable and truthful about your thoughts and feelings and actions.
Totally. I was just talking to a close friend about this today, and she talked about this experience of having this memory resurface of being with her mom in the grocery store, and that she wanted to try Ovaltine. And she was like, "Oh, Mom, I want to try Ovaltine." And her mom just dismissively said, "No, you won't like that," and grabbed like Nesquik chocolate milk instead. And how so many years later, it was just a reflection of her feeling that her mother didn't actually know her, and this feeling of she had to abandon her authentic self because everyone was telling her what to be or who to be. She was just saying like, I wish my mom had reacted to that differently, maybe with curiosity instead of dismissing what I wanted, or maybe asking, why do you want to try Ovaltine, or why do you think it'll be good? And instead her mother was saying like, I know you, you don't know you, like not letting her trust that she knows herself well enough to know what she likes, and instead just grabbing what she thought she would like, or what she did, she didn't feel. And this happens as moms, right? Like we just get, like you were saying, like exhausted or tired or busy or whatever, and we do this with friends or whoever also, but mostly with children, because they listen to us. They have to, we are guiding them. And so many times just reminded me of myself that so many times I'll be like, do you really want that one? Like this feeling like, do we have to do this thing because I'm just like too tired to do this thing right now? Like, or, I know like the things in your head as a mom where you're like, I know you're not going to want that one. You're going to want this one. I
And
know
I've tried it.
We
I've been there. I've done that.
Yes.
Just trust me.
Yes, just trust me. But at the same time, we can't. Like we have to be. And it really, when she told me this story, for me, like you were saying, it was just this wake up call of, oh man, I got to watch that with my own kids, because I don't want them to have that memory. Because for her, like remembering it now, I mean, it represents so many other things of how she couldn't be authentic with her family.
Absolutely.
But I don't want to do that with my kids, right? Like I don't want my kids to feel that way, or other people in my life to feel this way. But yeah, we all abandon ourselves. We all feel like this. People will run away if I'm not authentic. And I can remember visceral memories of this happening, right, as a kid for me. And I think everybody has that. So if we all have this self-abandonment, what can we do about it? Like, how do we start to put those pieces back together?
Sure. Yeah. And look, again, it's like 70% of the day. It's like not trying to hold this level of perfection that like we never do that as parents. It's about also like the recognizing the value of repair after any kind of rupture, even if you consider like that, like a mini rupture of like, oh, I did it again, right? Like we can't do better till we know better. And so just by being like a conscious observer of your own thoughts, feelings, and actions, you're already participating and attaching securely. And so when you observe yourself do something that's coming from like a survival pattern, or it's coming from like a place that is a younger part of self in like fear, or right, like fear of rejection, or fear of not having enough money if the kid wants to buy that thing, and it's just going to be wasted, and I just worked hard for this money, and now like I can't just let you buy the thing that you think you want because I know it's just going to be this piece of plastic that you're over with in a few minutes when you get home, right? Like thinking I do know better. And so like there are always going to be those moments, and we're human. And like I think self-compassion is so valuable in realizing that everything is just a lesson. Everything is an opportunity to learn and grow. And like no matter how big the rupture is, and like if you screamed tonight before listening to this podcast, at your children, then it's about the repair that you do next, going back and saying like, I recognize the way that I handled that was like really out of control. And like, I want to model how to regulate my emotions. So I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to support myself in that. And I really would, I appreciate if you can have patience with me while I'm learning how to be the best parent that I can be. And that I am just learning along with you, like, so what you were asking though, is like, how do we not self-abandon? So with your friend, what I would guess is that then she grew up, and while she was trying to have relationships with partners or even friends, she was not able to trust her own intuition because her primary caregiver was telling her, you can't. Like, this is what your gut is telling you is going to be good for you. And your primary caregiver is saying, like, no, it's not, or you're wrong. And so then that is like the beginning of what self-abandonment is like not trusting our own intuition and thinking that we don't know what we want or need. And so it's about like getting familiar with like, what do I even like? And like, what is the difference between a want and a need? And like, do I need honesty in a relationship, or do I just want it? And or do I not even want it so that I can just like maintain being cordial, like so getting curious. I loved that you used that word earlier, getting curious with yourself about your own wants and needs. And part of my process in that, especially with dating, so that I didn't just like put on the show, like put on the when they do like a facelift on a house. So it's like, it's got all the same bones and foundation, but they just like redid some of the wall stuff. And then they're like, okay, let me sell it for like a really good price. Instead of doing that and then having later the partner find out about the other stuff that's behind the walls, or like if somebody's trying to like paint over mold, and then sell the house. And then like, instead of doing that in relationships and then having my partner later find out like, oh, this is what's going on underneath, is like, I started to shine light on everything in my metaphorical house, like myself. And so that I could get curious about it, figure out where is that coming from? Like, when did I first start acting that way? When did I first start feeling that way? How is this, what action is this feeling connected to? That's really, really valuable. So if you catch yourself doing the same action over and over, write it down and be like, what is the feeling connected with that action? And when do I first remember feeling it? Was it as a child? Was it as a teen? Or vice versa. If you keep feeling this type of way, okay, what are the actions that you're doing that are associated to those? That's a really great place to start, because that's going to teach you that's about yourself and develop a relationship with yourself that has more clarity. And when you have that, you can actually like turn towards authenticity, because you no longer feel confused about who you are. You have like an understanding about why you behave this way and why you feel this way. And then you can actually repair those feelings and you can pivot those behaviors. But until we know like the why, we're still kind of just like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, that's saying, that's like, just doing the facelift on the house and then trying to sell it. So in relationships, what I did with dating my husband actually is I wrote out my ideals list, that old thing, like write out everything that you want in a partner. And then instead of looking for that outside of myself again, right, I decided I was going to become everything on my ideals list. A friend of mine actually was like, okay, now become your own ideals list. And I was like, like, what? And then it's like, well, maybe I don't really need that, because it's like to hold yourself accountable to like becoming your own ideals list is a tall order. And yet while you're doing that, you're growing your self-esteem by doing esteemable acts. You're growing your self-worth because you're keeping your commitments to yourself. And you're then trusting yourself more. And so you're not needing someone else to validate you so much, or like tell you you're beautiful or you're smart or you're enough or it's okay, because you're teaching yourself that you've got this and you are showing up for your own life. And then you're going to attract someone from this place that is healthy, adult, secure, while you're busy doing things that you love. So you're probably going to attract someone who also has similar shared interests. Right. And then you're no longer like trauma bonding in relationships. And this goes for friendships too. You're no longer then attracting from this sick and suffering place of trying to have someone fill that hole that really only, for me at least, a spiritual connection was able to fill.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I think it is this beautiful concept of, am I who I want in my life? Right. And just looking at yourself of who am I attracting, and like, I mean, I think about it like as magnets, right? Like we're going to attract someone to us who is like us or who's on the same wavelength. Or I guess tuning forks is like a better metaphor for that, right? We attune to someone who's on the same frequency as us. And if you see this happen in real time, it really makes a huge difference. Like when you tune with the same note, like there is this huge vibration that comes together. And so making yourself into the right note, right? So you can attract people who are like you. And I love the metaphor you gave of like not coming from this sick place or not coming from this place where, you're hiding something underneath and just like putting lipstick on a pig, but you are, becoming whatever you want to come, the beautiful swan, whatever it is, so that you can be with another swan, right? So I really love that. And I would love to chat a little bit then about, so in my experience, as we start doing these things, right, as you start thinking more about, who am I? Where do these behaviors come from? How do I change these behaviors? And you start reparenting yourself and loving yourself and doing the shadow work and all that kind of stuff. Then there becomes struggle in your relationships inevitably, like the ones that you have, right? So you start having these relational struggles and people start kind of falling out of your life, it seems like, or like as much as new people come in, old ones go out, but sometimes it's hard. Like sometimes you get tested. And so I think this is like a great place to talk a little bit about like boundaries and how do you utilize those in this process. And, I even, part of me, well, let's do the boundaries first. I do want to kind of talk about like if there are any signs that like someone is on this path. Like, are there signs that that you've healed a little more, like are in yourself, that you're feeling more ready? Is it just that you start attracting more like-minded people to yourself? Do you feel more emotionally steady? Are
Sure.
those some of the signs? Yeah.
Yeah, and like no longer being willing to accept just what is offered to you, but really having discernment on like what do I want. Like so often I would like be like, yeah, I like this guy, but when I looked underneath it later at my like relational timeline, it was like, well, he liked me.
Mm-hmm.
And because he liked me and was giving me this attention and was like courting me, then it was like, I liked that. But did I
Mm-hmm.
really like him and who he
Mm-hmm.
truly is? And like, so now, like, stepping into authenticity, you get to choose who you want to be with. And if they're your match, they're going to choose you also, instead of just trying to be chosen,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, so many of us are driving on, I want to be chosen. And
Mm-hmm.
then we're willing to just accept what comes our way instead of like being a co-creator of our destiny and really um, having that ability to say no respectfully and like being able to say like I appreciate the time we spend together and I really like adore you as a person and I also don't see like us as a long-term match and that's
Yeah.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
and learning how to like walk away with honor and respect and dignity and grace instead of like the slam the door, get out
Mm-hmm.
of my life energy, which is like most people like will ride the wheels until they fall off. And that's like how relationships end. And so being able to recognize when somebody's not a match for you is a byproduct of doing this work. And it's kind of like you lower your emotional pain tolerance a bit. So it only takes a little bit of a blip on the radar to recognize, oh, I'm out of alignment. Like, oh, this person is, just not my match. Instead
Mm-hmm.
of like, I'm going to try to make it work. I'm going to change like, how I'm behaving. I'm going to change who I am over and over and over to make it work. And
Mm-hmm.
then once it does work, we're still like unsatisfied
Mm-hmm.
or feeling like disgruntled or having resentments because in order to make it work, we had to abandon our authenticity.
Hey friends, it's Jayan here. If you have been feeling really stressed out about the world lately, you are not alone. There's been enough crazy and fear flying around the internet that even I've been knocked off my rocker sometimes. But it's times like these that I'm really grateful for the tools I have to regulate my nervous system. I developed these tools for myself when I was going through the thick of it. My babies were young and I had a ton of repressed anger. And these tools helped me through other stressful times, including negotiating my own divorce, having difficult money conversations, and of course, the whole COVID experience. And I've put all these tools in a method I call the authentic self-care method. This is different than other self-care programs because it is a framework for you to find your special sauce when it comes to self-care. And let me tell you a secret. Step 1 is not take a bath, get a haircut, or go to the gym. Step 1 is regulate your nervous system. And that's exactly what we do inside the 3-in-1 membership. This powerful program includes focused journals and meditations you can do in just a few minutes, like the fight or flight session, the hippocampus session, which rewrites your ability to see new possibilities, and the vagus nerve session, which helps you regulate your whole body in a crisis. Using these tools, members have reported feeling more empowered, more expansive, and many experienced relief from actual physical pain, all for less than $2 a day. So join the 3-in-1 membership now so you can learn these tools today. The world is not going to become less crazy. The only thing you can control is how you respond to it. The 3-in-1 membership will help you do that, so click the link in the show notes to enroll today.
So like things that you can do is ask yourself, like, what do I love doing when I'm alone and like no one's watching, right? Instead of like how we're so performative often in the social setting. And like, when do I feel most energized? And also like what drains me? And then in Pivot, we look at our value system also from something called the whole perspective. And we do this before addressing like how to set healthy boundaries, because your boundaries are going to be related to your whole perspective lens. So it's like this lens that you can put on and you can see the world through, and you can also use to make decisions. And it has 5 categories, and most people are functioning from like 2 or 3 of them regularly, and maybe don't even acknowledge 1 or 2 of them. But it's emotional, intellectual, physical, financial, and spiritual. So if you break those down into like, what do I value in each of those categories? What is important to me? What do I like in each of those categories? Then you're going to get to know yourself. And then when someone is out of alignment with your value system from a whole perspective, that's when you get to utilize your boundaries. But it's going to be so much easier to be able to tell, instead of living in that, like, I'm so confused. I don't know if he's right for me. I don't know if, I should make that decision or take that job. Instead of being confused, you just look down at your values and you say, like, this fits for me physically, this fits for me financially, but this does not fit for me spiritually or even intellectually. So like, then you can make your decision from like a really discerning, good, rational thinking place and move forward like that. So in order to then have healthy boundaries, what I like to present to people is that boundaries are not demands on other people's behavior. So often we'll be like, my boundary is like, you don't call me anymore. And it's like, well, again, that's like putting yourself at mercy. You're being a victim of the other person's behavior. So if they go and like miss you and want to call you, then you're like, you don't respect me, you don't respect my boundary. Well, actually, if it's really your boundary, it is your internal behavioral change. Like, you're doing the boundary for yourself and by yourself. So if they do call you, instead of answering them and saying, you don't respect me and you're not holding, you don't care about my boundaries, you don't answer.
Right. Or you block their number.
Right. That's a real boundary.
Yeah.
Right. It's something that you're doing for yourself to keep yourself safe. And the way you figure out where the boundaries lie in a relationship is something we call the circle boundary system. Is like the outer person in your life is somebody that has no contact. So someone that you are blocking. And if you saw them walking down the same aisle in the market, you would just like turn your cart around and go the other way. That's someone who is like absolutely no contact. They're not safe for you. And it has nothing to do with how much you love them. I think that's like such a strong, important factor to realize about boundaries. If you are a parent with a child who has addiction, for example, like I obviously have like worked with people and know people in my community that getting sober, like their parents had to essentially block them or had to like take away the key or had to not have them at family functions. So they had a no contact with their child. And obviously the parent, I'm sure, loved their child. It had nothing to do with how much they loved them. It was that there was not a reciprocal trust that could be established in that time of their development. And so sometimes we have to really separate ourselves from people that we really love. And it does not define how much we love them when we do that. And when we do that, we actually can stop enabling them or empower them to hit a bottom of their own where they can then make the behavioral changes to re-engage in the relationship versus just having contact where we're fighting and we're becoming more resentful and it's getting worse. Like it can actually be better to separate ourselves, because when you realize that a relationship is not like necessarily healthy to overshare in, like let's say you have, so the next category is acquaintance, and then there's the semi-category. Acquaintance, you're just cordial, it's your barista and whatever. And then you get into the semi-category and it's about shared interests. So let's say you have this friend and you have the shared interest of hiking and brunch and shopping, and you guys have like the best time doing those things. And then whenever you overshare a little bit about work or your relationship or your kids, then it's like, it just doesn't feel like you're vibing and it feels like whatever. You can recognize that's just where the boundary is. And if you don't overshare, you can have a thriving relationship. And they don't have to be your all and everything for it to be like a valuable relationship in your life. And so most people will hop from outer, not knowing someone at all, and then just shove them right into good, which is the category after semi, which is founded in reciprocal trust. So we take someone, we don't even know them, and then we're just like, okay, I'm going to trust them until they show me that I can't. But whereas like in Pivot, we really encourage you to use a vetting system. Become cordial with them and then move into shared interests and what do you guys have in common, and then test the waters, share a little bit more. Like if you really want to have reciprocal trust with this person, share a little bit more about something and see if they reciprocate. See if they can maintain their acceptance of you when you're dipping your toe in just a little bit more exposure of your authenticity. And if the connection can be maintained there or not. And if so, you're going to move towards the good category. If not, it's okay to stay right there with that boundary of not oversharing about those topics and then still enjoy a relationship with that person.
Yeah, it really reminds me of like on Fridays, I'll go play volleyball, right? And with these gals, and it's great. And we play volleyball, and it's great when we play volleyball. But when I have someone ask me about like, what work do you do, right? And my work's not very common. I usually just say like, I'm an attorney, and like leave it at that. But started talking a little bit about astrology, it's like instant discomfort, right? Like, but this is just my job, right? This is my job. This is what I do. And that's what it reminded me of. This semi category is like, we have a great time when we play volleyball together. And like, that's great. But if I share even a little bit deeper, it's like, nope, And sometimes I think for people, the reason the semi category is so hard, maybe not for all people, but I would say like water signs particularly probably, but like people who maybe who aren't used to boundaries, because so many of us aren't used to setting boundaries or keeping boundaries, or it feels like exactly what you said, like we don't love them or they don't love us because they have a boundary and we always want to push back against it. But it can be hard when you realize like, oh, I'm in someone's semi category. Like I thought we were good friends, but we're not. We're only semi friends. We're in the middle category. And sometimes that can feel sad because you feel like, oh, I missed out on the opportunity to have like a good friendship and I thought I was going to have a friend. But I think it's important to note that like you have people, even if that person only sees you as semi, like there's people you also only see that way. And it's okay to have all kinds of different friends. And sometimes I think it's hard for us to have relationships in that middle ground. And so I think it's great that you point that out, that like it's okay to have friends where we have these kind of boundaries that are just our common interests, like a club or sports or, you know, school or with the coworker, right? Like it's okay to have that, and that's part of having relationships too.
And even beyond it being okay, that's the category that has the most people in our life in it. You know, like the other people that you engage with at your kid's school, or right, like the most people in our lives actually do belong in that category. And when we can accept that and like feel comfortable and safe with them there without needing them to be more or needing us to be closer for us to feel okay or for us to feel worthy or valuable in the world, then we can thrive in our relationships, because what we're doing is we're also creating safety for them. They feel safe in our engagement and in like our company, because we're not pushing them into uncomfortable conversations. And like we know the no-go zones, right? So we know the safe activities and the safe topics, and we're able to stick to those. Then the other person actually feels safe. And often what can happen is, if you are meant to be like close or good friends, as a result of them feeling safe, then they can open up to you and you can grow into the good category. But the good category is actually usually pretty small, and it might even be like friends that you don't talk to regularly, and then when you do talk to them a couple months later, it's like you pick up right where you left off, and it's you just have this connection. And but your day-to-day life often as adults is filled with a bunch of semis, and there can be grief about that initially. Absolutely. And we actually like developed a grief module in part because of like the way people were feeling when they realized this, that like, because we so think growing up, I think again, social conditioning, that like we have to be so close to people to validate like our worthiness in the world, like, and for them to accept us on this deep level when we're being in our authenticity, in order for us to be okay. And yet we're actually able to maintain connections when better and more thriving ones, when we just recognize how much of ourself can we share with that person, and have them still feel safe too.
Yeah, because I would say there, like, as you were saying that, I'm glad there's like this grief component, because to me, I'm like, oh, there is like, I feel this sense of sadness and grief about that, like this grief. And it is like part of that learning, like, you can't be everything to everyone, right? Like, you can't be everyone's everything, and that's okay. And I think that's part of the reason we kind of, a lot of people crave this idea of like fame or being popular or being that way, because they think that equals great connection, because what they really value is deep connection. That's what they want. They want real deep connection and value and to feel worthy. And they're seeking it by trying to get more people to love them and to look at them and to see them and to adore them, instead of actually creating these safer connections. And what I'm hearing you saying is that having boundaries in your connections and being okay with having lots of people who are in this semi category around you helps you to make space for deeper connections to come into your life. Mm-hmm. Is that?
And then, yeah, and you don't have burnout so much, because like you're not using your energy on these other relationships trying to make them good relationships. And so when the good ones are coming around, you actually have like energy and life to give and share with them, instead of missing the opportunities to connect with your goods because you're over here trying to make everyone else, like you said, love you and be their cup of tea, and realizing like, yes, there's grief when you realize you can't be everyone's cup of tea often. And then also being like, okay, when I'm rigorously honest with myself, some people just love coffee. Some people only drink water. Some people want champagne, right? And so I spent so much of my life morphing myself, being like essentially an energetic chameleon of like, what does this person want? Especially when I was trying to date, you know, like, okay, well, I'll be champagne for you and I'm going to be tea for you. You know what I mean? Like, and so that's what I mean by abandoning our authenticity in order to maintain a connection. And so what are you? Like, are you like a tall glass of water? And like, that's what it means to stand in the sunlight of your truth, being water, and recognizing that some people think water is boring. And some people can't get enough of water and realize like it's the like life force that they need first thing in the morning. And so those are your people, right? And that's okay to like allow other people to like other things other than you without taking it personally and making up stories that something's wrong with you just because they love coffee and your water.
Yeah, I think that's a great metaphor for it. And I also have heard it said, and I think this is very true, that authenticity brings polarity, meaning like when you are authentic, you really bring and magnetize people to you, but you also are really going to push away people who aren't for you. And that can feel like a double-edged sword, but really it's for your good, right? Like what would you rather have? Like a bunch of people who don't really know you and don't really love you and, who are just there because you're trying to please them all and like being burnt out? Or would you rather have those, few deep, like your deep true tribe? Which would you rather have? And that's what standing in your authenticity is about, is finding that true deep tribe and finding yourself too.
100%. And I spent most of my life in that first category, like people pleasing and just trying to figure out what it was that everybody else wanted me to be and trying to be that. And there is this void that's in between those two things when you are figuring out who you really are and what you really want. That is often so overwhelmingly scary because it can just look like a dark hole. Like, yes, I want that thing you're talking about over there, Julie, like with this tribe. I'm over here and I have no idea how to get there. Like that's too big of a leap and that's too scary. And so it just starts with recognizing that it's, if you're feeling grief about realizing that you don't have your tribe yet, that trusting that it does come. Like I was there and now I am still developing. We moved recently, so I'm developing like a new tribe in my new town, in my new state. And so it's always a process. And yet the things that you can start doing immediately for yourself, by yourself, is like starting to journal. As corny and as like frustrating as that might sound, if you've heard that all your life, when you start journaling, it's like the thing that I started journaling about was all my fears, because fear is like just fear of losing something that I have or not getting something that I want. And those are the reasons often why I would self-abandon and not be authentic, was I'm going to lose something that I have or I'm not going to get the thing that I want. And so writing out all my fears, and then sometimes I'll fold the paper in half and then I write out the opposite. So like the contrary action or the contrary feeling or the contrary thought, like what is the exact opposite? And like that can feel like such a big jump. And so then I try to fill in the blank. I'll pull out a few that are like the ones that are really standing out as like the most powerful ones and take it to like another piece of paper and try to like fill in the blank, like sort of like when you're doing like a goal sheet, like, you have the end of the year goal and then you have like the daily goals, the bite-sized stuff. So the contrary one is the big picture goal. And then how do I get from where I really am to way over here is going to be bite-sized little actions. And so it's like I'll write out, if my fear is like when I was moving, that like I'm not going to be able to like find friends, especially like right now when we moved, we decided to homeschool. So like my bandwidth to like go out and meet people is very different. Whereas like before the kids would be at school, I could like do some things in the day sometimes. Anyways, if that's the fear, and then the contrary is that like, I am my own best friend already. And then like, how do I invest in being my own best friend? And then trusting that as I do that, I will automatically be attracting friends into my life who like, I don't have to promote myself and try to like be like, hey, let's be friends all the time, right? Like I can just be in my authenticity that I am my own best friend and I'm safe in any environment, in any room I go into, I can take care of myself in that space. Then the people who resonate with that, with the tuning forks, will then be attracted to that energy automatically. And I don't have to be worrying about the fear, because for me, it's always just pick one. It's fear or love. And if I'm in fear, it's my self-will. Like I'm afraid of letting people down. I'm afraid of, like failure. I'm afraid. Self-will run riot on my life. And the opposite of that is love, which to me is in my higher power will for my life. Like the universe's will for my life, my purpose. And so at any given moment, I can just recognize which one I'm in by like being like, am I thinking something loving? Am I doing something loving? And if the answer is no, then I can like be like, okay, how can I pivot into something more loving right now? And maybe that is just like pausing and taking a deep breath. That's a loving action towards yourself when you're feeling overwhelmed. Maybe it's setting a timer and putting your phone away, until the timer goes off. That's a loving action that is going to be like a bumper in, like if you're bowling, it's like putting up the bumper so you don't hit the gutter. Is like, how can I do something a little bit more loving right now? And in doing so, I will automatically be able to attach more securely to myself in any situation, and then I will not be abandoning my authenticity. And that's how I'm going to attract the people in my life who are actually matched for me and be living in my purpose.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you gave us some concrete examples, right, of what we can do, things that we can try, like the journaling. I love that you helped people understand this concept of and the visual of being your own best friend, right? Being your own best friend, and then being able to feel secure because you love yourself. Like you are your own best friend. You're okay with yourself, because I do think there are many people who are really afraid to be with themselves and to be by themselves and don't love themselves, right? On different levels. But I think people are afraid. I know this sounds silly, but I think it's so true. I think part of the reason people don't do this inner work is because they think it's going to be boring, or that they think it's going to be scary to be by themselves, right? Yeah. Or with themselves, because we always have input, right? Like we always have like a text message, something to answer, something to do, like all those little dopamine hits. And then when you have to do this for yourself and be by yourself, you're like, I can't do that. That's like slow and quiet, and like, I have to really dig into myself, and that's scary. And what if there's nothing worthwhile there? And so I love that you talked about this validating process, and I love hearing you talk about how you're safe in every environment, like you can make yourself safe. And for me, this has been such a beautiful conversation, because we talk so much about femininity here and the feminine, and the feminine is all about receiving, like letting yourself be a receiver and receiving those things. And hearing you talk, I can hear that you let people come to you, right? Like you let those people who vibrate with you come to you. Like if you take care of yourself, and that's a very other big part of the feminine, is diving in deep to yourself and knowing yourself. And as you know yourself and dive in deep, then other people will be attracted to you. You can receive as the feminine and be that receiver. So thank you for having this awesome conversation with me. Is there anything you want to leave our listeners with? Something else you want to say?
Yeah, well, since you pointed out the, tangible tools and spending time alone, it's I think it's really important to do this tool that I do is called Shop Your Thoughts. Because when you get quiet and when you are with yourself and when you are going in and you're alone, so we'll hear so much going on in our head. And so being aware of the messaging, like where did it develop, and like whose voice is that really? Like who really said things to you like, what's wrong with you? And then you say it, like you burn the eggs or something. You're like, what's wrong with you? Like, is that really your voice, or is that someone else's, that you heard growing up and you took it on as your own? And being able to start to like separate like what is my truth, and like being able to drop demands that you're putting on yourself and your life that don't actually relate to your personal values. So like an example is like our middle daughter absolutely despises brushing her hair. She has like sensory processing challenges, and like she is very sensitive, and brushing her hair is just this like horrific thing. And I was forcing it and forcing it and forcing it. It was like hurting our relationship. And so now like I'm letting it be. And I realized that I was putting this demand on her because of like what other people would think of me as a mother if they saw her hair like that, and is that really connected with my value, and my relationship with my daughter is a higher priority in my life than what other people think. And if I know that I'm showing up as a mother to the best of my ability every day, and like doing all the things that I can, and yet this is something that she's like begging me not to force her to do, than like, can I be okay with other people possibly judging or not? Like, who knows what they're really thinking, like we place so many demands on ourselves based on like social things and like conditioning from our own upbringing. And so really being able to separate what's my family legacy, what is my legacy versus what I brought into this relationship or what I brought to this moment in time, and being able to shop your thoughts is like, if you went into a store and you could buy everything when you had all the money and you could buy anything and everything in the store, you still wouldn't buy every size and every color of that blouse. You would buy the one that fits you today. And maybe you were a different size 5 years ago. You wouldn't buy that size. And you wouldn't buy the size that you want to be from 5 years from now. You would buy the size that fits you right now. And you would buy the color that lights you up and feels safe to you. And so start doing that with your thoughts. That made a huge difference in my life, where instead of buying every thought that comes in my head as true or valid, like, what's wrong with you? Like, I see that thought and I'm like, oh, that thought does not fit me today. Like, that doesn't belong. I'm not going to grab that thought, take it, pay for it, walk out of the store and wear it all day long with shame, and guilt, and carry that anymore. I get to like hear thoughts come in, because we can't control the very first thought. We can, though, control what we do with that thought. And if we go down a spiral with it downward, or if we go on an upward spiral and pivot it. And so I like really encourage everyone to shop your thoughts today and only buy the ones that fit for who you are today or who you really are working towards being, and just wear those out all day. And if you buy a thought and you realize later this does not fit me, it's okay. You can just return it, just give it back. And then that's where you come into like, what's the contrary thought, and start to invest your time and energy into thinking different things to get different results.
I love that. These are wise, wise words, and a great example for us to do, something that we can tangibly do, shopping our thoughts. I really, really love that. So London, where can people find you to get more of this goodness?
Sure. I would love to see you on my socials. I would love to interact and engage with you. So if you are listening to this, please DM me. I'm at @HeyIt'sLondon_. And I would just be so grateful if you could follow me there on all the things, and let's have a conversation. I would love to talk to you more about anything that you heard today that you're interested in or curious about or even confused about, that I could maybe clarify for you.
That's amazing. And for those who don't know, London is going to come give a workshop in the membership, the Feminine Alchemist membership. We are so stoked to have her. So sign up for that if you haven't, if you want more of London. London, thank you so much for speaking with us, talking about these beautiful ideas of authenticity, attachment, all the things that we can do. I think it'll make a really tangible difference in people's lives. And just thank you so much for giving us your time.
Absolutely, Julie. You are making a big difference in this world. And thank you for making this platform for us to engage in and for people to gather these tools. And so I congratulate you and appreciate you. And so thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. I really take that to heart. And everyone, go check out London, and we will see you all next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. Please make sure to give us a 5-star rating wherever you are listening and share with someone you know. See you next week.